If you keep starting over, you're missing one mental shift that changes everything. You know it. The endless cycle of excitement, collapse, and reset. It feels like you're making progress, but deep down, you know you are just running in circles. And the more you restart, the more you teach your brain one dangerous lie, that quitting is normal. But here's the truth, you're not failing because you're weak. You're failing because no one showed you the shift that stops the cycle forever. And once you see it, you'll never look at your habits the same way again. So let's start where it all begins. The trap of starting over. You've lived this cycle before. You start with fire in your chest. Maybe it's a new workout, a side hustle, or a morning routine you swore would finally change your life. The first few days feel electric. You're energized, focused. You tell yourself, this time will be different. This time I won't quit. And for a while, you believe it. You wake up early, you feel motivated, you see little wins stacking up. It feels like proof that you've turned a corner. And in that moment, it's intoxicating. You feel unstoppable. But then reality knocks. A long day at work, a phone call that throws you off, a night you don't sleep well. Suddenly, the routine that felt so easy yesterday feels almost impossible today. You tell yourself you'll skip just one day and pick it back up tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes. One missed day turns into two. Two become a week, and then you find yourself staring at the same place you've been 100 times before, back at zero. And it's not just the habit you lost. It's not just the progress that slipped away. It's something heavier, the story you tell yourself when it happens. That quiet, poisonous whisper, I guess I'm just not built for this. Maybe I don't have the discipline. Maybe it'll just start fresh next week, next month, next year. That's how the trap tightens. Starting fresh feels clean. It feels powerful. It gives you a false sense of control. You convince yourself you're not quitting, you're resetting. But deep down, you know the truth. Every time you restart, you don't just wipe the slate clean, you wipe away your confidence. You erase trust in yourself, and it adds up. Think about the graveyard of things you've abandoned, the gym memberships that never made it past February, the projects you swore you'd finish, the promises you whispered in the dark that never saw the light of day. Every restart leaves a scar. Every restart weighs on you, until one day, you don't just feel like someone who failed a goal, you start to believe you're the kind of person who always fails. That's the real damage. Not the missed days, not the distractions. The trap is deeper than that. The trap is teaching your brain that a single slip erases everything. The trap is training yourself to believe that falling means you have to crawl all the way back to the starting line. And here's the cruel part, the more you repeat this cycle, the stronger it becomes. You're not just losing momentum, you are destroying it, over and over again. And each time the hill feels steeper, each time the weight feels heavier, until the very thought of trying again feels exhausting. But what if I told you it's not you that's broken? What if you've been taught the wrong way to think about progress from the very beginning? Because here's the truth, this endless cycle has almost nothing to do with willpower. It's not about how strong you are, it's about how you see progress itself. And that's why discipline alone will never save you, why discipline isn't enough. Most people think the answer is discipline, that if you just push harder, grind longer, and force yourself to suffer more than anyone else, you'll finally break free from the cycle. That if you had the willpower of a Navy SEAL, you wouldn't fall off track. And maybe you've whispered the same thing to yourself late at night. If I was stronger, I wouldn't have quit. If I had more discipline, I'd already be where I want to be. It sounds noble, it sounds like the right diagnosis, but it's a dangerous lie. Because here's what discipline actually feels like when it's the only tool in your arsenal. Imagine this, you wake up groggy, your body heavy with fatigue, but you drag yourself to the gym anyway. You force the weights up, not because you're inspired, but because you're terrified of what it means if you skip. Or picture yourself sitting at your desk, eyes burning, scrolling through emails at midnight. Not because it matters, but because you swore you'd push through. For a moment it feels heroic. You convince yourself this is the cost of greatness, that you're proving something by powering through the pain. And maybe you make it through one day like that, maybe two. But discipline is like adrenaline, it burns hot and it burns fast. And when it runs out, it doesn't just fade quietly, it leaves you empty, exhausted, vulnerable. That's why you've burned out before, that's why you've had streaks that felt unstoppable until they weren't. Because you tried to run a marathon on rocket fuel, and rocket fuel was never meant to last. Think back to the last time you forced yourself through sheer willpower. Maybe it was a diet you held onto with clenched fists. Maybe it was a side hustle you tried to build on zero sleep. Maybe it was a New Year's resolution you swore would stick. And for a while, it worked. You pushed, you gritted your teeth, you resisted temptation, And then in one moment it all collapsed. The food craving, the skip day, the overwhelming exhaustion. And once it broke, you didn't just fall back to baseline. You plummeted. That collapse is the curse of discipline alone. It tricks you into believing you're making permanent change, when in reality you're just tightening a spring, and the tighter you pull it, the harder it snaps back. You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because you're playing a game you can't win. You're betting on a resource that will always run out. That's the brutal truth. And it's not just you. I've seen people with unbelievable grit, athletes, founders, engineers, collapse in this exact same way. They weren't weaker than you. They weren't lazy. They were fighting with the wrong weapon. Because here's the reality: the people you admire, the ones who seem untouchable in their consistency, they don't wake up every day relying on raw discipline. They're not superhuman. They're not grinding themselves into the ground. They've discovered something deeper, a mental shift that makes discipline almost effortless, a way of thinking that doesn't collapse under pressure. And until you see what that missing piece is, you'll keep living this exhausting cycle, grinding, burning out, restarting over and over again. Because discipline alone will never save you, not when you are fighting against an invisible enemy that sabotages you before you even realize it. And that enemy, it's the most common, the most subtle, and the most destructive one of all. The hidden enemy, all or nothing thinking, the enemy that keeps you trapped, isn't laziness, and it isn't lack of motivation. It's something far more subtle and far more destructive. It's called all or nothing thinking. And once you recognize it, you'll see that it's been silently sabotaging you for years. Here's how it works. You start a new habit and everything feels perfect. You're eating clean, sticking to your workout routine, writing down your goals every morning, checking off the boxes on your new schedule. You feel in control. You feel proud of yourself. You feel like you've finally figured it out this time. For days, maybe even weeks, you carry this energy and tell yourself, this is it. This is the version of me I've always wanted to be. But then life throws its first punch. Maybe it's a slice of pizza on a Friday night. Maybe it's a workout you skipped because you got home late and felt too tired to move. Maybe it's a day when your routine slipped your mind and you didn't journal, didn't plan, didn't follow through. And in that moment, your brain doesn't treat it as a small stumble. It doesn't treat it as a simple detour. Instead, it screams, you ruined it. You blew everything. What's the point of continuing if it's already broken? It'll just start fresh on Monday. That's the voice of all or nothing thinking. It convinces you that progress only counts if it's flawless, that a single mistake erases all the good you've done. And the moment you believe it, you throw away everything you've worked for and drag yourself back to zero. Think about how insane that is. If you drove your car and one tire went flat, you wouldn't get out, slash the other 3 tires, and say, well, I guess the whole car is ruined. No, you'd fix the one tire and keep driving. Yet when it comes to your goals, that's exactly what you've been doing. One bad day, one mistake, one slip, and instead of patching the tire, you destroy the whole vehicle and convince yourself it's over. And it gets worse. Every time you restart, you don't just lose progress, you train your brain to expect collapse. You reinforce the identity of someone who quits when things go wrong. That's why every new beginning feels heavier than the last one. That's why your excitement fades faster each time. Deep down, you've rehearsed the failure so many times that part of you already knows how the story ends. I know you've felt that sting before, that heavy moment when you stare at your broken streak and feel shame in your chest. You tell yourself, why do I even try? I always end up back here. That's not the truth. That's the voice of all or nothing thinking, whispering the same poisonous lie it's been feeding you for years. And every time you listen, the cycle repeats. But here's the truth. Falling doesn't erase your progress. Missing one day doesn't erase 10 good days before it. Eating one bad meal doesn't undo months of training. Skipping one routine doesn't mean you've lost the discipline you built. The damage isn't in the fall. The damage is in the choice to throw everything away the moment you fall. That's the trap. And once you see it for what it is, you start to realize something powerful. Success has never been about perfection. It has always been about continuation. The people you admire, the ones who stay consistent year after year, they don't succeed because they never stumble. They succeed because when they stumble, they refuse to restart from zero. They pick up exactly where they left off, and they keep moving forward. That is the mental difference. That is the edge. And it changes everything. Because the real problem isn't the mistake. The real problem is believing the mistake means the journey is over. And once you finally see that, you're ready to learn the mental shift that breaks the cycle once and for all. The mental shift that changes everything. Here is the truth you've been missing. You don't need a fresh start. You don't need to wipe the slate clean. You don't need to keep going back to the beginning every time you stumble. What you need is the mental shift from restarting to continuing. Think about it. Every time you've hit reset, what have you really done? You've erased not only your progress, but also the confidence you earned along the way. You've trained your mind to believe that anything less than perfection isn't worth holding on to. That's why you feel like you've been running in circles. You've been building and demolishing your foundation over and over again, never giving yourself the chance to stack the bricks long enough to build anything real. The shift is this: stop thinking of progress as a fragile streak that breaks the moment you fall. Start thinking of it as a chain that only grows longer every time you pick it back up. When you stumble, when you miss a day, when you break the rhythm, you don't go back to zero. You simply continue from where you left off. That's it. Simple, but life-changing, and here's why it matters. Starting over feels exciting at first. It gives you that rush, that clean slate energy, the illusion that this time will be different because everything is new. But that excitement is a trap. It's temporary. It fades the moment life gets messy again, and when it does, you're left with nothing, no progress, no momentum, just another broken promise. But when you shift from restarting to continuing, the game changes completely. You're no longer building fragile streaks. You're building resilience. You're building identity. You're teaching your brain that failure isn't final. You're teaching yourself that falling is part of the process, not the end of it. And the more you practice continuing, the stronger you get at it. This is exactly why successful people look so unstoppable. It's not that they never slip. It's not that they never lose focus. It's that they've mastered the art of continuing. They don't punish themselves with restarts. They simply resume. That's why their progress compounds while others stay stuck in the loop of false beginnings. Let me put it in simple terms. Winners don't start over. Winners continue. They don't waste years building and burning down. They keep stacking brick by brick, mistake by mistake, until the structure becomes unshakable. That's the mental shift you've been missing. It's not about perfection. It's not about pushing harder. It's about refusing to reset. It's about protecting the progress you've already made, no matter how messy, no matter how imperfect, and continuing forward. And once you understand this, everything changes. Because now you are not chasing a perfect streak. You're building an unbreakable habit of continuation. You're not trying to be flawless. You're trying to be unstoppable. But I know what you're thinking. That sounds powerful, but does it really work in the real world? Does it actually hold up when life gets chaotic, when setbacks pile up, when the plan falls apart? The answer is yes. And the proof is everywhere in every field, in every story of lasting success. Proof in the real world here's where the shift stops being theory and becomes undeniable. Because once you start to look closely, you'll see this principle everywhere across every field, in every story of real success. The people who rise to the top, the ones who make impossible progress, aren't the ones who never slip. They're the ones who keep moving forward after the slip. Think about the writer who sits down for just one focused hour a day. On paper, that doesn't look like much. 60 minutes? That's nothing. But stack that hour across 365 days, and suddenly, they've written an entire book. A book that most people spend years saying they'll write someday. And here's the key: do you think that writer never missed a day? Of course they did. Life got messy, deadlines piled up, inspiration ran dry. But instead of throwing everything away and saying, "I'll start fresh with a new idea," they sat back down the next day and continued. And that's the difference. The book exists because they refuse to restart. Now picture an athlete. The best in the world don't just train harder, they train with precision. 1 hour of deliberate focus on the skill that matters most. Footwork, speed, accuracy outweighs 10 sloppy hours of going through the motions. Do you think they never had off days, missed practices, injuries? Of course they did. But they didn't reset the clock. They didn't tell themselves, "My streak is broken, I'll start fresh next season." No, they picked up where they left off, continued refining, and that's why their craft compounds into greatness. That's why they move differently. That's why they stand apart. And entrepreneurs? The same rule applies. While their competitors drown in meetings, distractions, and firefighting, they carve out just one protected hour to think, to zoom out, to make decisions others are too busy to even see. And those decisions, made consistently day after day, are the ones that change the trajectory of their companies. Do you think those founders never had setbacks, failed launches, financial crises? Absolutely they did. But instead of burning everything down and saying, "We'll start again when the timing is better," they continued. They took the lesson, integrated it, and moved forward. That's how entire industries are disrupted, not by fresh starts, but by continuation. And this isn't just about the giants of the world. Look closer, and you'll see the same truth in everyday life. The musician who practices their instrument for half an hour a day, the parent who reads one chapter to their child every night, the student who studies one lesson at a time instead of waiting for a perfect plan. None of them are flawless, none of them are perfect, but they continue, and because they continue, their progress compounds until it looks like magic to everyone else. Meanwhile, the majority, they stay stuck in the cycle of starting over. They chase perfection, slip once, and then hit reset. They wait for the next Monday, the next January, the next right time. And in waiting, they waste years. They never build the momentum that makes the extraordinary look ordinary. That's why the 1 hour a day writer ends up with a finished book while others have nothing but excuses. That's why the consistent athlete looks superhuman while others quit before they ever get good. That's why the entrepreneur who continues builds an empire while others restart endless side projects that never get off the ground. The proof is undeniable. In every corner of the world, success doesn't come from fresh starts. It comes from the courage to continue. And here's the best part, you can do the exact same thing. This isn't reserved for geniuses, billionaires, or prodigies. Continuation is available to you right now. But knowing it isn't enough. If you want this shift to actually change your life, you need a way to apply it starting today. How you apply it now, here's the part you've been waiting for. Because it's one thing to understand the shift, it's another thing to actually live it. If you want to stop restarting, if you want to break out of the trap for good, you need a simple system you can apply today, not next week, not next year, right now. And the first step is this. Choose one thing that matters. Just one, not 10, not everything at once. Because if you spread yourself too thin, you'll end up back in the same cycle of overwhelm. So ask yourself, what is the one problem in my life that if I solved it, would make everything else easier or better? Maybe it's your health, maybe it's your career, maybe it's building that project you've been dreaming about for years. Whatever it is, pick one and lock in. Second, protect just 1 hour a day. 1 hour, no distractions, no excuses. This is not about working 12-hour days or sacrificing your entire life. It's about carving out a single sacred hour where you move that one thing forward. Put your phone in another room, close the door, tell people you're unavailable. Guard it like your future depends on it, because it does. Third, remove the pressure of perfection. You don't need to crush it every single day. You don't need to hit personal records. What matters is continuation, even if all you can manage is 15 minutes, even if all you can do is a single page, a single rep, a single call, it still counts. Because you're continuing, and every time you continue, you're breaking the cycle of starting over. Fourth, expect the slip. Don't treat setbacks as a surprise. They're guaranteed. You'll miss a day, you'll get tired, life will throw chaos your way. But when it happens, don't restart, don't reset, just resume. Pick up exactly where you left off. That's it, simple. And yet, that one decision changes everything, because the moment you refuse to restart, you've already won. Finally, track your continuation, not your perfection. Don't measure yourself by how flawless you were. Measure yourself by how many times you came back. Write it down. Mark the days. Build a record, not of streaks, but of resilience. Because when you look back after a month, after a year, you won't see a perfect record. You'll see a story of persistence. And that story will change the way you see yourself. This isn't about superhuman discipline. It's about building an identity. The identity of someone who continues. The identity of someone who doesn't collapse at the first slip. The identity of someone who keeps moving forward no matter how messy the path gets. And once you apply this, you'll start to feel the difference fast. The pressure lifts, the shame of restarting fades, the weight of perfection disappears. Suddenly, your progress doesn't feel fragile anymore. It feels unstoppable. But there's still one thing you need to face, because even after you apply this, there's a seductive lie waiting to pull you back into the cycle. And most people never see it for what it really is. It's the lie of the fresh start, the lie of the fresh start. This is the most seductive lie of all, the lie of the fresh start. And it's dangerous because it doesn't feel like failure. In fact, it feels exciting. It feels powerful. It makes you believe you've taken control again. But beneath the surface, it's the very thing keeping you trapped. You know the feeling. You mess up. You lose focus. You slip from the plan, and instead of continuing, you tell yourself, it'll just start over. Monday's a new week. January is a new year. Next month, it'll really do it right. And in that moment, you feel a rush. The burden of failure lifts, replaced by the thrill of a clean slate. You feel lighter, as though wiping the past away will somehow make the future easier. But here's the truth. That thrill is an illusion. A new calendar doesn't give you new character. A clean slate doesn't erase the patterns that tripped you in the first place. The fresh start might feel powerful, but it's fragile. Because no matter how many times you reset, life will always interrupt. And if you don't change how you respond to interruptions, you'll be restarting forever. Think about how many times you've lived this exact story. New Year's resolutions that never survived past February, Monday promises that died by Wednesday, bold declarations that ended in silence. Each time, you felt a burst of hope, but what did it really bring? Another round of the same cycle, another excuse to delay, another reason to waste precious time waiting for the perfect moment. And here's the real cost. Every fresh start trains your brain to believe progress is fragile. It teaches you that consistency only counts if it's unbroken. And that belief is lethal. Because once you accept it, you'll never trust yourself to stumble and continue. You'll only trust yourself to quit and restart. And with every restart, your momentum dies, your confidence shrinks, and your identity weakens. This is why so many people spend their entire lives in the loop. They don't lack motivation, they don't lack drive, they're addicted to fresh starts, addicted to the high of wiping the board clean, even though the price is years of lost progress. But here's the shift you must make. Progress doesn't need to be reset. It needs to be reclaimed. You don't need a clean slate, you need a dirty one that you keep writing on. That's how real success is built. Not by erasing mistakes, but by layering growth on top of them. Not by starting again, but by continuing anyway. Because the truth is, the fresh start doesn't make you stronger, it makes you fragile. But continuation, picking yourself up, resuming where you left off, refusing to reset, that makes you unstoppable. And when you finally see through the lie, when you stop worshiping clean slates and start protecting your messy, imperfect progress, you unlock something most people never experience. You unlock the ability to reclaim momentum. Reclaiming momentum after a fall, no matter how much you learn, you will fall again. You'll miss days, you'll mess up, you'll lose momentum. And in that moment, everything comes down to one choice. Do you restart or do you resume? Most people restart. They throw away weeks or months of progress because of one slip. They convince themselves the streak is broken, so the journey is over. And that's why they stay stuck at the beginning. But now you know better, you know the truth. One mistake doesn't erase your progress. One mistake doesn't erase all the days before it. The real damage comes when you hit reset. The shift is simple. Don't start over, continue. Pick up where you left off. Reclaim your momentum instead of throwing it away. That's how you protect progress. That's how you build identity. That's how you become unstoppable. Your life doesn't change when you start fresh. Your life changes when you refuse to reset. The shift you've been missing is this. Progress isn't fragile. It only dies when you let it. So the next time you fall, don't erase the journey. Resume it, continue it, protect it, because that is how you stop starting over and finally break free.